Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. My name is Tanya Schwartz, and today I have the pleasure of presenting our special guest, Andreia Marshall-Netto, and she'll be talking about the spiritual responsibility. But before we introduce her formally and bring her, hi, Andrea, we are going to invite everyone to join us in our initial prayer to prepare the ambience.
Tanya, Tanya, you need to turn off your YouTube over there. It's playing twice.
I
There's
don't
something
have
open.
I don't have it open. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully everybody is listening to us properly. And we are going to start with our prayer now. We thank our spiritual friends for being with us this morning, this opportunity of studying, of learning, of being together in these moments that the world is needing so much of our vibrations, our special love to all of everyone. So we thank them and we ask their inspiration to our guest and friend, Andreia, and all of us who are watching, that we are able to get this information in our lives and live and practice every day. And so be it. So now, before we give the word to Andreia, let me introduce her, our friend, dear friend, and who promotes Spiritism all over the country and the world. Andreia is currently the director at Conscious Living Spiritist Group, secretary of the board of the Spiritist Federation of Florida, managing director of Leal Publisher, that is an affiliated branch of Leal Livraria in Brazil, and in the translation and dissemination of Divaldo Franco's Spiritist books, and FAB Publisher, an affiliated branch of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation's publisher in the dissemination of Spiritist titles. So welcome, Andreia, now officially.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. I want to invite everyone to send us questions at the end of Andrea's talk. We'll be chatting with her and listening to a little more of what she has to bring to us. So make sure to send your questions or comments at during the talk. Okay? So now the word is yours.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much for the United States Spiritist Federation's invitation and also the International Spiritist Council. It is truly an honor, a great responsibility, no pun intended, to be here to talk about this topic, spiritual responsibility. I just want to point out that we always make a point to talk about the titles and the books that were used in order to facilitate our reflections for today. And we want to point out the book Prelude to the Divine Kingdom by the spirit author Amelia Rodriguez, psychographed by the medium Divaldo Pereira Franco, as well as A Light in the Darkness by the spirit author Joana de Angelis and the medium Divaldo Pereira Franco, and also The Gospel According to Spiritism. The conversation found on Matthew chapter 19, verses 16 through 30 was profound and filled with meaning. The rich young man asked the master, "Teacher, what good things must I do to get eternal life?" For which Jesus answered, "Why do you ask me what is good? There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." And he answered, Which ones? Jesus replied, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. Honor your father and mother and love your neighbor as yourself. The rich young man answered, all of these I have kept. What do I still lack? At that moment, when he asked, what do I still lack? It was through this strange intuition that he knew that one day he would be in front of reality, facing him and inquiring him about his own existence. Amelia Rodriguez will state that at that very moment in which he asked the master, what do I still lack? The air was stifling and nature stood still. He could hear his own breathing as the question stayed in the air. If you're willing, answered the master, to be perfect, go, sell all that you have and give it to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. Come then and follow me. Follow me. The voice pierced through him and permeated like a lemongrass scent, is what Amelia Rodriguez stated in this beautiful, beautiful story. She talks about that unmistakable magnetism emitted by that austere, deep, sweet eyes looking back at him. The rich young man had everything, materially speaking, yet something lacked in his life. Something that was not easily obtained was missing. Nonetheless, he wavered. He wasn't sure about what to do at that moment. He thought about his life, owning a luxurious villa, possessing magnificent treasures of the earth, but his heart was empty. And so, while he was thinking about his youth, the happiness, the parties, the constant invitation that delighted his young soul, he yearned for higher aspirations. He knew about that. He knew that eventually he would need to make a decision about all of that. He was unaware, indeed, at that moment, that the cause of his persistent melancholy, the sadness that dissolved his dreams, had indeed to do with the peace that he yearned for. Inside, he was screaming, Master, I will go and follow you. Still, he was hesitant. Yet, the hour, that moment, that second did not allow for any doubt. Everything about that statement from the master was important, and more than that, it was vital. Let us consider this for a moment, imagining that the master was in front of us, as if we were face to face with that reality. Go, sell everything, give to the poor, renounce all the pleasures of the earth, and follow me. A statement such as this one is deserving of reflection about our lives, about our own spiritual responsibilities. Because like the rich young man, he was pretty much doing everything that the commandments asked of him. But it was lacking just one factor. When we read the story and we see the rich young man stepping in front of the master, looking at that gaze, feeling naked, his heart pounding so fast on his chest that he felt like kneeling down in front of Jesus and giving in. That's what was his desire. The stranger, the master, was smiling at him, waiting for him. He knew he loved him, yet he knew that he waited for that answer. If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions. He could hear again and again, give it to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven. Then come and follow me. When he was able to speak again, he said, let me Let me please first go and complete in the games in Caesarea to win the prizes for Israel. No, I cannot wait, Jesus answered. The kingdom of heaven starts today and now for your spirit. There is no time to waste. But I waited for so long for this moment, he answered. This event, so close to the start of the racing season. I trained so hard. I hired the best slaves to train me. I bought the best horses. Renounce everything. Come and follow me. He would look at him and wonder, where do I know him from? He looks at me in such a way as if I am familiar to him. He wanted to run. He wanted to stay. He felt utterly distressed, this unknown turmoil beating inside of him. Amelia Rodriguez will state that he was basically in front of a situation that sometimes all of us encounter ourselves in. The horizontality of human afflictions encountering the verticality of divine sublimation. It is a conflict. It is a conflict that often we will face in this existence. And fighting that overwhelming fear, the rich young men continue. I will give everything I have. Money, gold, jewels, titles if necessary. That would be easy. But Jesus interrupted him. Give me of yourself, and I will offer you eternal bliss. What a high reward, he thought. What a high price to pay. He continued discouraged, thinking, his possessions, that would be easy to give away. But the riches of his youth, the vibrant treasures of vanities, of fancies, the family honors upheld in traditions, the pleasing admirers, flatterers, would it be necessary to renounce all of this? That restless thoughts keep flooding his mind. And the master, as if hearing his internal thoughts, responded with a silent yes when the rich young man looked up at his eyes. The dialogue was no longer possible. He felt that if he didn't run away at that moment, he could give in. And so he said, I can't follow you now. Forgive me if you love me. And he ran. A week later, in Caesarea, that capital of leisure and pleasure, we would find the rich young men. In the public festivities that was starting with the joyful pounds and sounds of different musics, the chariot competitions opened the races and the festivities. Whips lashing in the air, hands tight on the reins, charioteers speed up on that fragile vehicle. And during a less fortunate event and maneuver, a chariot flips over and the rich young man in that fragile vehicle falls to the ground. Horses racing through, wheels coming at him. The slaves were quick to be able to remove him from that situation, yet he felt the taste of blood, the sweat, the tears that was washing his face at that moment. And in that moment, he thought about the master. He heard the voice, renounce everything, come and follow me. Dear friend, was all he could say. He felt the true transparent hands, arms embracing him at that moment. And although he was disfigured and his face was washing tears, sweat, and blood, the condition in which they found him was with a smile upon his face. It is interesting to hear stories such as this and try to bring it into our lives, into the context of where we are in, where we find ourselves in. It's as if we continue hearing the message from 2,000 years ago, walk while you have the light so that darkness does not overtake you. Spiritism is such light that we have been given. And I often wonder, what was it personally that I did to deserve to have a reincarnation where I would be given such a light, where I would be given such an opportunity, and started considering with my husband in our reflections at home, where would we be without this light? Where would we be if we didn't have the information that brings about, that calls upon our own spiritual responsibility? There is a book that was released late last year called On the Way to a World of Regeneration, psychographed by Divaldo Franco by the spirit author Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, which is soon to be released, in which the spirit author pretty much starts the book off, it's about the pandemic, talking about our responsibility individually and collectively with what is happening with our globe today. Walk while you have the light so that darkness does not overtake you, is the message that we keep hearing over and over, because Spiritism came to pretty much illuminate our steps, illuminate our way. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda describes our planet. He's observing it from the spirit realm, from the spirit colony in which he found himself, talking about how our world prior to the pandemic was slowly being enveloped by what he called a massive mantle of darkness, fruit of the somber, dark, spiritual fluids that came from the harmful mental emanations of its inhabitants. Hatred, intolerance, prejudice, all sorts of negative, harmful mental emanations and fluids that we throw out, which actually compromises our globe. Allan Kardec will state that the quality of fluids, the quality of thoughts that we have, the sentiments from our heart have the power to transform the very psychosphere in which we live in. We would like to point out that the book Glorious Days brings this information about the aspect of psychical viruses and vibrios that affect our perispiritual body and that of those who actually instigated those type of feelings that come out from my heart, that come out from our heart. Individual responsibility, collective responsibility. So we have Spiritism arriving 164 years ago, bringing with it the dawn of a new era, calling upon men and women of this moment of transition to wake up from that tormenting sleep that have kept all of us behind. No longer walking around as sleepwalking, but rather being awake and aware of our responsibilities, inviting us to lift ourselves from the lower conditions that in reality allows us to acquire a higher understanding about life, about our duties, which the gospel, according to Spiritism, will talk about being that moral obligation that we have first towards ourselves and then towards the other immediately. Love your neighbor as yourself. Duty is what the Spirit Lazar will say is that law of life. It is found in the smallest details of our act as well as the most elevated one. And he's not talking about the duties imposed by our professions, what we chose to do with our existence, but rather about moral duty, which can only be attained by those who are aware and conscious about their own spiritual responsibilities. People's inner duty is left to their own free will. And so when we look at our existence and we see certain things that have been planned in this present reincarnation, we are going to realize that it is a fruit of our previous one. And it is a blessing indeed. All of it that we encounter calling upon us to fulfill our moral obligations is a duty in this present incarnation. I just thought about the conversation that Jesus had with Joanna de Cusa when she heard about him and learned about him and wanted to follow him. And what did he say to her? In the condition of being married to a man who didn't understand her Christian heart, the desire to actually be among those who were walking with Christ, he basically told her that the condition to follow him had to do with going back home and loving her husband, embracing him as a mother would do with a child, loving, encouraging him towards growth. That's moral obligation, spiritual responsibility. For the master knew that her commitment in that existence had to do with assisting her husband walk towards the light that had already illuminated her path. It is hard sometimes, and we find sacrifices that are pretty much often overwhelming to deal with. Yet we find with Spiritism that we don't reincarnate at a moment of transition such as this one, where changes are challenging and bring about obstacles that we have to pretty much deviate from without the assistance of the benevolent spirits. We know that they're there, and often that sting of a conscience is them speaking through us, waking up the guardian of inner integrity, is the words of the Spirit Lazar, warning and upholding us towards what is needed to do. They will tell us that when faithfully observed and obeyed, the duty of the heart uplifts us. But how is it? How is such a duty determined? How is it that we employ individual spiritual responsibility and collective spiritual responsibility? Well, they answer us. Duty begins precisely at the point in which we threaten someone else's happiness or peace of mind, and it ends at the limit we would not wish to see surpassed regarding ourselves. It is aligned with the golden rule, which is understood by all of the religious philosophies of our planet at this time. It is a summary of all of our moral speculations, is what it is going to say. It is that which brings about the courage of the soul to be able to confront the difficulties of life's struggle. It is both strict and yielding, ready to adapt itself to the diverse complications, and it remains unbending before temptation. It is interesting because it feels as if it's a spiritual armor of the one who is going to a battle to basically win over its own vices, its own inner difficulties and conflicts. Yesterday, I was watching a documentary on HBO about Alzheimer's called Hopeless. And it is the different families and the difficulties that they are encountering with having to care for someone in Alzheimer's in different stages of the patient's life. Some of it having been diagnosed within 2 months, some of it having been diagnosed with 8 years. And there was this woman, and she lived alone. It seemed like she was in a countryside, somewhere in the middle of the United States, I'm not sure. And she lived alone with her mother, who had very advanced Alzheimer's condition. The patience, the dedication, the devotion made me actually look at that and admire. When we look at situations like this, the spirit becomes beautiful. It is in such a way that we look at the struggle that a spirit is encountering, but being committed to their immediate family member, loving them, yes, shedding tears because it is difficult, but owning up to what needs to be done. She said, I am not married. I don't have any kids. And at the moment that she felt her life was picking up in the city, the devastating news of her mother's condition actually brought her back to what needed to be done. She didn't feel in her heart that it was right to place her mother in a nursing home. And so she cared for her. How amazing. How beautiful to see that. I often wonder, and say that symbolically our universe is filled with cabinets. In each drawer, there is a file containing our own history, our own path. And when we look at it and see how far we have come, let's talk about this. Often we feel like we are not owning up to what we need to do. But let's be mindful. It is Saturday morning at 11:25, and you are connected, trying to see if there will be something meaningful in this presentation that you can gather from in your own spiritual walk. Preparing the study, I felt honored to see it because it put me in contact with what needs to be done. But let's stop and look back at our own lives prior to Spiritism. Have we seen a change? Has it made it easier with certain aspects of our existence? Do we have the courage to look within and see what needs to be modified? Do we have the courage to renounce certain things and follow the Master? Those are all very unique and individual questions that can only be answered by us. But unless we are able to see a little bit of changes, we need to observe how we are utilizing the light that has been given to us with Spiritism. We need to see if we are fulfilling our duty, our love for God, our Father, who invested in this present reincarnation, whatever the situation might be. When we look at missionaries of the light and we find what goes behind the planning of each reincarnation, we are actually placed in the reality of a love that is great on our behalf. This is why we find the need to bring about the notion about duty, about our responsibilities, about what needs to be done. And so Lazar is going to continue saying, duty grows and radiates under a more elevated form at each of the higher stages of humanity. Humans, individuals, moral obligations towards God never stops. It never ceases. It should reflect the virtues of the eternal love, who does not accept an imperfect sketch because he wants the beauty of his work to be resplendent before him. We don't want to just be a sketch. We want to be that beautiful, resplendent work before God. This is why Joana de Ângeles will state in the book A Light in the Darkness that we are what we make of ourselves, that it is within us to search for what gives our life purpose, what is of vital importance, specifically concerning the soul. When the rich young man noticed that he was in front of that reality, that he knew it was a defining moment, Amélia Rodrigues stated that he knew that it was vital for him, for his own existence. She will state that any and all activities that we assume become duties demanding responsibilities from us. And when we look at our lives appreciating it from a Spiritist perspective, we start understanding that our physical existence is going to entail multiple different educational programs that end up contributing to our moral and intellectual development. This is why we talk about our present reincarnation as an investment, because all of the programs that have been programmed for us come about with that moral intellectual development. It is here to assist us. And so we should, as spiritual beings, aware about immortality, aware about the fact that we are the authors of our future existence, we start observing and appreciating it in that sense. We start seeing our reincarnation as that extraordinary, invaluable opportunity to fulfill our responsibilities, looking immediately at our home, our family members, and then we stand out into society. Joana de Ângeles will state that spiritual responsibilities actually might bring us in contact with the work at the Spiritist Center, where we are able to give of ourselves to apply the healing passes if we are actually called upon to do, after doing the proper training, studying that the Spiritist Center offers. That we are going to study if we are called upon to start a mediumistic meeting, or if we are called upon to participate in an existing one, that we should have what I like to call a continuing education, meaning we keep on studying as much as we can so that we can actually fulfill the spiritual responsibility trusted upon us at the Spiritist Center. When we are invited to partake and do a public lecture, talk, presentation, we are going to apply ourselves so that we actually seek into the solid books, starting with the Spiritist codification, and then utilizing the other ones that are here to complement and offer us additional material so that the public sees and hears Spiritism and not Andreia. Andreia is not important. The message is what is important at the moment. So here we are, and we ask ourselves, I actually like to consider that we have reached the point where we are the young adults, spiritually speaking. We are no longer children, unaware of responsibilities pertaining to our growth. It's not like we are kids here being told to clean our room and we are being disobedient. No, we have already grown. We have responsibilities that are being called from the young spiritual adult. So we are going to uphold from being reckless with our existence. Joana de Angelis will talk about this aspect of being reckless in many lives. This is why when we look at our lives right now, she's going to say that according to the severity of each occurrence in a previous existence, there is a specific course of action in this life meant to rebalance, re-educate, to awaken the individual's lucidity, fostering discipline, promoting happiness for him or her. The goal of reincarnation, however, is not meant to be punitive, to be negative, but she says that when suffering is present and the affliction comes from that suffering, it is that discomfort calling upon us, calling our attention to order, to discipline, to the responsibility and duty. This is very clear to see sometimes when we are really deviating from the correct path and suffering in life in this present causes of affliction, as the gospel according to Spiritism brings us, it is meant for us to reconsider and seek the correct route that we should be walking yet again. Responsibility to develop the intelligence, our emotions, our discernment, which is needed in the process of self-illumination, enabling for us at that moment that experience that is going to allow us to grow in solidarity, in fraternity, in genuine love for our neighbors. And while it is hard to do so, especially when we encounter what is called the enemies, the gospel according to Spiritism will say that developing love for one's enemy is not meant to say that from one day to the other, we are going to have the same loving ties that we would for someone that have already been with us for a while, that the ties have been developed and strengthened over different existences. But it means that we don't wish any evil towards someone else, that we don't put any obstacles to try to overcome the distance that has been placed because of this or that situation. We could ignore all of that. Sure, we could. But how often have we been doing that? How many lives have we been ignoring all of those responsibilities? It is something to consider. It is something to consider. When Spiritism comes and teaches us that beautiful, beautiful phrase, without charity, there is no salvation, we seek to understand what that means for us. Is it one of those religious impositions where we are blindly following something without considering what it is? Or do we have already material to develop reason and understand it in such a way that it facilitates our lives? Charity as understood by Christ, benevolence towards everyone, indulgence for the imperfections of others, and forgiveness for the offenses. I always say that it's a ladder. For those who work out, it's kind of like graduating from the weights of dumbbells or kettlebells. You go from 5 pounds, which is benevolence towards everyone. We can all be kind. And then you go on to 10 pounds, which is indulgence for the imperfections of others, because we too are imperfect and wish for others to be indulgent with us. And then you graduate to the 20 pounds, which is the forgiveness of offenses. Harder sometimes, but possible, as we see in so many cases. So we start understanding that spiritual responsibility has to do with service, which should become the goal of our existence. Understanding that there is a meaning behind being of service, of doing something for others, which has to do with our immortality. Maybe this is what led Albert Schweitzer to talk about the fact that he didn't know what people's destiny would be, but he said, one thing I know for sure is the only ones who are truly going to be happy are those who found and have sought to serve. It is a beautiful, beautiful statement that he brings us. Come and follow me. Here we are. Joana de Angelis will state for us that to make the decision to live joyfully and experience well-being, even during the not-so-happy times, must be the ethical behavior of everyone who has found Jesus, the most shining example of perfection that we have. When Jesus, we have already encountered him. And when we learn about his teachings and we read it and try to bring in the depth of it, an understanding about it, we understand what he meant when he said to those he healed, go and don't sin anymore. That is a spiritual responsibility that he placed upon the individual who was healed to understand what he or she needed to do in order to attain the spiritual and physical health. It is that divine awakening of the inner divine essence that we have. It is the fundamental reasons of a happy existence that allows us to increase the responsibility of the soul for plenitude. If we want to reach it, we need to be grown-ups. We need to own up to what is expected of us. The fulfillment of our duties as citizens, as family members, and moral individuals is what is going to help us acquire even greater spiritual responsibilities in our lives. Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, in the book, my goodness, I always forget the whole name in Portuguese, nonetheless in English, Psychiatric and Spirit Obsession Disorder, he talks to us about responsibility. He will say, the fulfillment of our responsibility and our duties is a blessing of uncontestable value for us, which demonstrates our psychological maturity and our moral responsibility. Duty becomes a virtue when its objective is the fulfillment of responsibility that benefits others, that benefits social groups. Individual responsibility, collective responsibility. With Jesus, we learn about the duties of solidarity, realizing that the happiness of our neighbor is of vital importance for us as well. This is why I love Karen Armstrong. When she developed the Charter for Compassion, which, by the way, it's a great website, and you can actually enlist to receive their newsletter and partake in it, she talks about the need in our current society that we dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and place someone else there. When we look at people like Chico Xavier, Xavier, or Divaldo Franco, and we see their entire life dedicated to service and helping someone else, we find that we are able to do that too. Not perhaps in the sense in which it was done, and the greatness of which it was done, but if we are to start in the home, the cell of society, developing the sense of solidarity and love and respect, mutual admiration, assisting one another to grow, we are able to have an impact on society as well. And we often talk about this when we are unhappy with the things that we see outside in the world. We need to be mindful that we also have to be concerned about the inner world and what we are doing with our own lives and existence, committing to the spiritual obligations. Prospect of invaluable moral growth is going to open up to us. And the manner in which we perform it is what is going to define our personal future, inheriting the earth, partaking in the world of regeneration, because after all, we are in the moment of transition. And we need to take advantage of our time that we have received doing spiritually constructive work. Because in the word of the higher voices of the spirits, it is the Spiritist responsibility to cooperate in the progress of humankind by practicing charity in the most far-reaching sense, as we have already stated, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness, just as a master, our guide, Jesus taught us, being able to practice it without prejudice of any kind, prejudice of color, ethnicity, creed, gender, economic, social status, it doesn't matter. We find that we are here to develop the sense of love for one's neighbor. Being mindful of all of this, we are going to perhaps arrive in the spirit world better than when we left upon reincarnating. In my case, 43 years ago. On that note, I would like to call our friends back so that I'm no longer alone talking here with you guys.
Let me unmute myself. What a wonderful talk, and filled with the lessons, but also bringing to us, Andreia, all the hints, right? It's all there for us to follow, for us to learn and make our lives really better, even and despite all the things that we are going through and all the adversities, that we can find the joy when there is service and there is love in our lives. So it was really great. And I'm sure that a lot of questions, or at least, comments, and people want to participate more, with you and asking and sharing some of their, their questions. So right now, let's see if we have any questions. Our friend Danielle will be bringing to us from Julio Aniceto. Regarding responsibility that we plan, the spiritual plan, before reincarnating, can it be postponed in case we give up?
Oh, Julio. Oh, look, his name is Aniceto, one of the spirit's name in the Life in the Spirit World book. Very cool. A lot of people have this notion of responsibility in which they say, well, because it's a reincarnation and I'm going to be born again, I might as well just postpone it and do it later on. It's what I like to call the spiritual snooze button. It actually goes off and you keep hitting it, saying 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. It is important that we realize how much at stake it is, the reincarnatory plan. And the long list also to be able to be reborn. And when the spirit arrives in the spirit plane, realizing, the book Missionaries of the Life will talk about the aspect of the completers, meaning they did everything that they needed to do. And some people actually go above it, but others don't. And they talk about this. I really encourage the reading of it because it does cause a lot of suffering for the spirit in the spirit plane to see that they willingly postponed what was expected of them. So when we see that, we are going to understand even more the aspect of previous causes of affliction. So if we already know about this, right, it would be best to try to employ and make a little effort. The spirits talk about this in the spirits book, and I don't remember the question by heart, but they do talk about the fact that we are able to overcome the negative tendencies, that which still holds us back, but we lack effort a little bit, right? So will and effort being the potential of our souls, we need to be in contact with that. We need to make it be awakened. We have these moments where I like to call firefly moments. They go on and off at night, but they do shed light. So we have the ability to become more than that, more than fireflies, being aware of our responsibility. Here we are. It's going to be difficult. Sure, it is going to be difficult. But if we keep accumulating, right, what needs to be done, it's going to be very hard. One of the things that we need to consider also is that we never reincarnate with more than what we can handle. We try to put more on our plate, symbolically speaking, asking for this type of trial, asking for this type of expiations. But the spirits know what our strength and our weaknesses are, and they're going to give us what we are able to handle. And sometimes the difficulties that we encounter with our families, we actually had a business planning in the beyond, and it was developed for success, meaning they knew that we could fail, they knew that we could step back and deviate from what is expected of us. We all can, because forgetfulness of the past is something very real. Yet they know that we bring within that sting in our conscience, that voice that tells us what we need to do or what we shouldn't do. So this is why I talk about the fact that we have already reached a young adult, spiritually speaking, age where we are already able to discern between what is right and what is wrong. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and plus, right, we are now with this opportunity, God knows afterwards, to reincarnate again, how long will take, and put everybody together. There needs to be in terms of new trials, and there's better to do what we came here for, right? Let's keep postponing. We've been postponing for a long time already. Anyway, so let's see, comes another question. It feels we have been offered a spiritual banquet, but we haven't accepted in its true meaning. Would you say this is the case?
I do. I feel that sometimes when we have the notion of responsibility, and some people actually deviate completely when they are in front of a body of knowledge such as Spiritism, because it calls upon doing what is hard. It calls upon, although we know that it's going to bring us happiness, that it's going to bring us joy in the long run, some people are afraid of it. Change, actually, getting out of being accommodated with how you are, scares people. The notion of responsibility scares some people, and they do step back, they do deviate. And this is something really interesting. I was just thinking about the dialogue that took place between Alcyone and Pollux in the book Renunciation, and he's about to reincarnate, and there's a group of spirits that are talking about their fears of not being able to fulfill what was expected of them. So this fear is very present sometimes in seeing right there that banquet, but with it, in order to be able to really enjoy it, in order to be able to really digest it, one needs to do the work. And the work is hard, especially in a world of trials and expiations or atonements, such as the one that we find ourselves in. How many of us often have done that, right? It doesn't mean that because we have it, I'm going to say for myself, that I fulfill it completely. It's not true. Otherwise, I'd be lying, right? But being aware of it and trying to make an effort to actually be able to enjoy it, to take it in, is part of our moral growth. And we should keep making an effort to achieve that.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that we are really too involved in our material world, and it's so important what you said before, that we are aware of us as spirits, right? Like, and that's the only way for us really to at least try harder to follow in the right footsteps, instead of just being swallowed by our everyday lives and material things that we are. I mean, it's part. We are in the material world, but not. It has to be beyond that, more than that, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So Daniel Santos is asking us, what do you say to those who blame society or others for not fulfilling their own spiritual responsibilities. That's a good one.
Yeah, Danielle, I'll talk to you after the live for this question, okay? It is interesting to see this question that he brought, because this is something that is happening a lot. When we place blame on others and we are pointing fingers out there, we are not doing the work for our own responsibilities. It's easy. The other day we were talking about this, how often it's so much easier to blame political leaders or people in society in leadership about what they're doing. And when we do that, we are not being vigilant of our lives, but someone else. So the teaching, pray and be vigilant, is not pray and be vigilant of others or what they're doing, but rather of yourself. What am I doing? Because in the end, it's between us, right? Mother Teresa said that in the end, it's between us and God. It's not about the other and God. It's about us and God and our responsibility. The aspect of religiousness, of being aware of what we need to do, is also the talk about the fact that we are trying to be connected with our Father, who is the one who invests for us to be enrolled on planet Earth, on this planet, to try to develop all of our qualities. It's interesting because I watched the other day the situation that happened here in Florida, in which some kids were listening to really loud music. There were 4 teenage kids in the car, and this guy was unhappy about the music, and so he asked them to turn it down. Well, one of the guys in the car turned it down, but the other felt offended, and so he put it even louder. And what did the other guy do? He shot into the car 10 times, and one of the kids died. And so during the trial, it's interesting to see that he didn't own up to the fact that he overreacted for a situation that could have been avoided. And he claimed that the kids had a gun, which they did not. But when he was actually tried for life without the possibility of parole, the judge said something that is contained in the gospel according to Spiritism. If we were to be mindful that a lot of the conflicts, a lot of the situations that happen, we actually contribute towards it, we would be more aware of how we react to one another. When we give into the impulses of hatred and intolerance and prejudice, which is actually the core result of the case that I just talked about, because it was a situation between 2 people with different races, we are going to find that a lot could be avoided. And the judge said that. He said you could have avoided a situation instead of using extreme force to void out your opinion. And so what that they were listening to loud music? They were expressing the right that they had as citizen at that moment. So the gospel according to Spiritism will say that how many situations we could avoid by not giving in to the impulses. And this is why we see so many things happening in society that is wrong. A fight that starts out because somebody said something that offended us. Instead of just taking a step back and with compassion saying maybe that person is having a bad day. Road rage, somebody cuts us off, and we see cases in which a person actually goes and hits the car. Where is all that anger coming from? So responsibility takes also in the fact that we need to be aware of what is within us that is going to cause hurt for others and immediately towards us. Because whatever we do within the law of cause and effect is going to be taking note within our own selves and is going to be needed to be repaired. So putting blame is something that we've been doing for a long time. It's so much easier to blame my husband because he was short with me. But what did I do prior to that to contribute for that situation, right? And if I didn't do anything, am I able to take a step back and look at it and say, no, maybe he had a bad day at work. So let me see if I can do something to ease up the situation. Love is irresistible. I've seen this happening, and I talked about this, when somebody is being cursed with us or being short with us or being hard with us, and we respond back with kindness, the other person is disarmed. They can't react back as we would. So we need to be aware of that. Putting blame is something we've been doing for centuries, and it's about time that we stop doing that and be more vigilant and aware about ourselves.
Yeah, we can make such a difference, right? When we can just don't react so automatically and can stop and put in the little acts what we learn, right? Because sometimes we feel like spiritual responsibility, it's this big things, right?
Yeah.
Well, every single moment, starting from our homes, right there, we have the opportunities of acting correctly, of getting to know where our hearts are and people around us. It's so true how easy and how difficult it is all at the same time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Very good. So let's see, one more. Would you say that people confuse spiritual responsibility with exterior expressions of the religions, meaning go to a temple weekly, doing daily prayers, and similar acts?
Sure, I do. It's so exactly what you just said. People confuse this aspect of it as something great and something, with these exterior expressions of religions that the United States Spiritist Federation is asking. But spiritual responsibility is about taking the religiousness within, meaning that which connects us to the Creator, and try to apply it, as the Spirit Lazarus said, duty in the smallest act, also in the greatest ones of our lives. Whatever we assume in our existence becomes our moral obligation and duty. And so spirituality should be able to facilitate that and make it a little easier so that we can understand how to be a good person in society, being in the world and not of the world, as they talk about being overtaken by the things of the world. So a lot of people are lost in this aspect that religion is about exterior factors. And we need to start understanding about the aspect of religiousness within. Emmanuel talks about this. He talks about the fact, I think it's Living Spring, I'm sorry, I don't recall the book, but he talks about the fact that we need to observe faith as an objective of our existence. Faith is going to empower us, to give us strength to face all of which comes to us. So it's something that is alive. It is a force that is in action. It's not something that is just in the exterior. It's within also. And that is applied for every situation that we can think about. In marriage, in life, in society, in illnesses, whatever the situation we may encounter is, unless we are observing the religion that we embrace as that which is going to connect us to God, we need to be a little bit inquisitive about how much that is benefiting us as a individual in society. So,
yeah, it's a nice challenge, right? How are we living what we preach or what we learn, and really in every aspect, and religion. I mean, a lot of people really confuse, and we have to. When I say a lot of people, I say we should also start thinking ourselves, how do I take this? Because like you said, it's easy to say people, others, right? But am I also doing the same thing? Am I going to the Spiritist center sometimes a week and this and think that that's it, I'm done, I'll get to the other side, and that's how I will be able to find a better place or better? No, we can all, in any situation, be aware of what you just said, how spirituality is in our lives and not just the structural religion or anywhere that we can go. There is no such a thing, right? So let's see. Okay, from Yasko. Yasko is with us again. Thank you.
Hi, Yasko.
Great info, dear Andreia. From spiritual realm, dark mental emanation from Earth was noticed before pandemic outbreak. How this mental state translates to social and ethical behavior that underlined both the initial over the planet COVID spread and today's multiple outbreaks, severe at each variant. How Spiritist Foundation can help to effectively turn around.
Wow, yes.
Wow.
I was gonna talk to Daniel after the live. I'm gonna be talking to you after the live. This is a very important question, of course, that she's bringing us. And I would like to, I opened the wrong one. If you allow me, I want to make sure that I bring a content here from Joana de Angelis. Do we have time or no?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. Here we go. Spiritism is going to be able to allow us to try to overturn this situation, because it's basically telling us about how we can modify our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, the contribution that the spirits are bringing us, so that we can have an understanding about what brought about the illnesses in the first case. And there, I mean, it takes a while to answer this question. I'm not going to try to do within a minute. But while I'm looking for that, there is a chapter called Thoughts and Illnesses from Joana de Angelis in the book Glorious Days, in which she talks about what I mentioned during my study. And here's what she says. She says, the cultivation of hatred, jealousy, envy, ire, and other assorted anesthetics of the spirit produces psychical viruses and vibrios that attack the body of the host and attacks the body of the person who, unguarded, inspired the production of such devastating waves, which the mind produces according to its moral constitution. She says, at the same time, ideoplasties, those thoughts sustained by fixated on disturbing and violent ideas, contribute to the emergence of toxins that invade the body, upsetting its vibrational structure, causing it to become ill, and working to destroy its defenses, the immunological factor. When we consider this immunological factor, and we understand that any illnesses, when it's already displayed in the physical body, it started in the perispirit there, and I'm not talking about COVID, I'm talking about what she's bringing here, how the cultivation of all those negative feelings is going to contribute for our immunological factors to be in distress, to be open to the type of illnesses that take place. She talks about our mental behavior being responsible for generating either well-being or ill-being. So how can Spiritism contribute for the mental behavior? How is it that we are going to do that? Well, we see often Spiritism calling about inner transformation, modifying the very structure, the landscape of our souls. And we start understanding that is more than a religious aspect. It is a scientific one. We see some studies conducted about that. So she talks about those bizarre behaviors that we see in society, which is contributing for these ill factors that are getting people ill. And let's also consider the law of cause and effect. A lot of people get sick because they are aligned with the law of cause and effect, okay? We can't generalize all of this, but just bringing about what you said and talking about what Joana de Angelis is stating here, once again, we go back to the core of the matter, which is the heart, which is the sentiments, the feelings, our thought waves, our mental attitude, and our behavior in society. When we see people invading the Capitol Hill in the way that they did, I kept wondering about the cloud, the psychical cloud that was embraced in that place, and our founding fathers trying to actually diminish the waves of hatred and intolerance that was taking place. The battle between the spirit world with the benevolent spirits, trying to calm down that which is still vibrating in the inner core of some individuals in society. And how bad, how sad, how deplorable that situation is. So a lot of compassion for people who are still vibrating and emanating those types of factors and forces into our society. Let us be the ones who try to work alongside the benevolent spirits to diminish some of these waves, some of these emanations that are causing these toxins in society. Let us be the ones battling alongside Christ so that actually the work might be finished. because that's what he's waiting for. And he's counting on each one of us. We are called soldiers of the new faith. So let's be very obedient and faithful to the commander in charge and try to follow him.
Yeah, that's right. Instead of contributing to, this bad side right now, right? Because it's very easy for us to fall into the despair or fall into get into this mindset. So it's a huge challenge, and also in this spiritual responsibility that you're talking about, to contribute to the betterment, right, of this psychosphere. Not really. And when we see all this, what are we doing? How are we positioning ourselves as spiritists, as sons and daughters, of God, into helping the planet and not adding to the problem, right?
Yeah.
So it's a major thing. Can you tell again the title of the book you just mentioned?
Glorious Days.
Glorious Days. Okay. It sounds a wonderful source of learning. So that's why I want to repeat so everybody can look for it, right? And study. Okay, let's see if we have one more question. We have time from Kirsten dos Santos. Great talk, Andreia. And a question. Can you give some concrete examples of what spiritual responsibility is? Thanks.
Look at her. She's my sister of the soul. I'm going to use her as an example then. The spiritual responsibility, it varies so much, right? Because our lives are all very different. But I'm going to use my dear sister as an example. She's a devoted mother. She is a devoted wife. She tries to do what she can to overcome herself. She is aware of what her frailties are, and she looks within to try to overcome them. She's also aware of what her strengths are, and she uses that to be able to make a difference around her. And I also know that she's a devoted spiritist disseminator also, and she tries to utilize the content within to make a difference. She is married to someone who is also aligned with the work of the United States Spiritist Federation, Danielle. And I know that combined together, they are trying to educate these kids so that they become the good person in society when they grow. So that to me is a concrete example of spiritual responsibility. And it's going to vary with all of us, right? If we are alone, or what do you say if somebody who's not married, who live alone, the responsibility to try to get to know oneself. The pandemic invited us to stay home, isolated, and there was a reason for that. To look at what needs to be modified, transformed, what we can use to actually make that happen, because we all have already great virtues within, and some are already blossoming, some are already growing, some of it are already showing the colors of the flowers of our souls. So let's be sure that we are watering it, that we are applying the proper nutrients, that we are seeking in prayer the strength that we need to be faithful, observant disciples of Christ. Spiritism is Jesus coming back to us, calling upon us to be aware of our present existence so that we don't fall into the dark abyss that we have felt over so many times in previous lives. Let us be aware of that.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, each one of us can find our way in so many ways. Like you said before, our everyday lives. Everyday lives. We have all this opportunity of finding and acting upon our spiritual responsibility. Mm-hmm. Let's move forward. Oh, again, Kirsten, how do you deal with the personal stress we experience when the people we love don't accept their own spiritual responsibility?
With compassion and understanding that we are, I always like to use the example of flowers blossoming. When we look at a rose plant and you see the buttons, some of them are flourished, some of them are opening, some of them are halfway there. We utilize the nature as an example. We are like that. We all flourish and open at the appropriate time. And we need to develop compassion and understand that if they are unaware of their responsibilities, becoming stressed about it is not going to help. We can either try to assist them, and if they're unable to accept that assistance or see it in the way that we do, we also need to give them the space and time so that they can learn in their own turn. Unfortunately, suffering might be something that is going to make them awaken. The pain from the situation might awaken to what needs to be done. And at many times for us, that was the one thing that impulsed, that made us actually wake up and be aware once and for all of what needed to be done. So I would say develop compassion and understanding, a lot of patience, and we were placed with each other in this situation so that we can help others grow as much as they help us grow as well. Even in their negative situation, we see an opportunity for our growth too.
Yeah. Well, like you said, we not being in a position that we are superior. That sometimes it's really
Hard.
much worse, right? Because you feel like, oh, I know this is so good for me, it helps me, and then we feel that the other one has to follow that path right now, right? And as you mentioned, the learning goes both ways. We're together for a reason, and I love the analogy you made with the nature. It's really something that we can use all the time, right?
All the time.
To learn. Okay, let's see. We still have more time, and Bob is bringing us another question. Any thoughts about spiritual responsibility on large issues like global warming and species extinction?
Bob, I missed you. So good. I think it's Bob Alberg, right? With the beautiful Marianne institution that he opened. Sure. This is a topic that is very conflicting for some people, right? The aspect of global warming and what have you. I think whatever speaks to our hearts, we should educate ourselves so that we can see how we can make a difference. Here in my home, I have someone who is always reminding me about the recycling aspect of Marcelo is somebody who's very aware all the time about that. I'm very grateful. Sometimes we forget, but it's not because we are being negligent or ignoring it. It's because some people really do forget. But on that aspect, Bob, I think that, like, for example, if you are aware of that and you are someone who's passionate about this, you try to find ways that you can be helpful. Again, we go back to that aspect of individual and collective responsibility. So we might join groups that might promote an understanding about both aspects. We might join organizations, try to give of our times, volunteering. We see so many beautiful movements happening on behalf of our planet, our home. When we are finally aware of what we might be doing to it, damaging the walls of this beautiful home that is hosting our present reincarnation, we might actually do something to try to make a change. So once again, I would suggest that people do educate themselves as much as they can so that they become passionate, because often we make a change when we are passionate about something, when something speaks to our soul. And we try to embark on that, which gives us meaning and purpose for our lives. So if you are someone passionate about that, Bob, I know your heart and beautiful blue eyes are in the right place to try to make that change. In the social media is such a powerful tool that we have in our hands, and we see so many people utilizing it in the wrong way. It should be a powerful tool to try to make an influence in a positive manner for that which gives us meaning and purpose in our life. So we can all make a difference somehow on any of the things that we are passionate about that is going to contribute for happiness, for future happiness, ours and that of the ones of our neighbors.
Yeah, thinking of ourselves, we're all creatures of God, right? The animals, the planet, the nature, everything. So definitely, what can we do is our spiritual responsibility. It's all related to God. Anyway, so let's see. I think we have time for one more. A lot of people don't even think of themselves as creatures of God. How can we share this spiritual experience to them?
That question looks like Danielle's question again. I know it's Danielle. You know, that is an interesting question. And I remember the Spirit Joseph on the Gospel According to Spiritism. He talks about faith, again, as being something that needs to, in order to be useful, it needs to be productive, it needs to be in action. And he says that those who profess such a faith in their actions actually are so powerful because it speaks to the ones who didn't have faith. And it speaks even to those who wish to say that they don't want to have it. They don't want to have anything to do with faith. That's how powerful it is. I think that when we act in such a way, I remember this person who comes to our Spiritist Center, he said that one of the things that really turned his soul awakened to the possibility of Spiritism and the liberating message of it is because when he heard it, some people that talk about it have such energy, have such lively about the way they speak. Their lives seems to be meaningful that they couldn't resist it. So they're now Spiritists. And I think that's what it's about. And developing the sense in someone that they are divine beings. We can even use other words if we wish, because we know about the aspect of God and religions, how conflicted it is for a lot of people from previous existences and painful experiences with religions in the past. So it's hard sometimes, right, for some people to develop this connectivity with God and the aspect of religion. I think maybe introducing Spiritism as that promised consoler that comes to tell us about the immortality, about reincarnation, about the process of discarnation, about the aspect of healing and illnesses, and all of that grows this aspect of religiousness within the person. Before they know it, they might not even consider themselves creatures of God, but they might see themselves as special beings, as someone who came from a divine source. So we need to be able to utilize the language that is going to speak to their souls. I think that's what matters most, and as opposed to just saying, imposing some ideas that might not speak to someone's soul entirely. We have someone who was atheist when he came to us. The notion of God is still very hard for him to conceive, but he's already accepting of this divine energy. And I tell him, the spirits tell us, we will only see God when we have reached that purity, but feeling it is something that we all can do. And he's one of the greatest examples that I have, concrete examples of trying to develop this notion of divine creatures of God within.
Yeah. Sometimes we get stuck in some terminology, right?
Yeah.
And it's so good when we just say, like you said, the feeling. And if you don't want to call it God, but you feel when you act properly, that's what really, I'm sure God does not worry about terminology, right?
Exactly.
By first name or something like that.
And then like, if you see, Divaldo Franco was somebody, he said he would much rather have someone in his life who was an atheist and practiced the good than somebody who called themselves Christian but were a hypocrite, not applying the teaching. So you have a lot of people who don't denominate themselves any sort of religion, but they're doing a good thing in the world, right? They are applying a basic golden rule, which for them is the right thing to do. And that's great too, right? It doesn't matter what it is. So I think that's really good to consider also how a lot of people talk about God, they talk about Jesus, but their actions does not reflect what they say. So
Exactly. Apparently, we have some comments that I will bring, so you can share. We can share with you. So, Bob, once again, he says from
I love it.
I guess
Love it.
the only ones among you who will be truly happy are those who will have sought and found how to serve.
Oh, it's so beautiful. So beautiful. You wonder what motivated Albert Schweitzer to do what he did. And that is his own commitment, but it is a spiritual responsibility. And he applied both his own learnings, his own profession, responsible professions, to try to apply what he did because he needed to. But what was it that called him? What was the driving force that took him where he did, right? And he's such a beautiful example that we have in society to try to learn from. I have his books. I really encourage anybody to get them, ebooks, whatever. But really try to dive into perhaps thinking, what is it that drove people to act in the way that they did? So we can feel also encouraged and empowered. It's irresistible.
Yeah. Then we have spiritual education in the light of Spiritism. That's what Andrea is talking about. We have to be a better version of ourselves. And as Spiritists, we are being held accountable for our actions.
Very good. Indeed.
Thank you. Any others? Oh, from Julio. Thank you, Andrea. I have always been curious about the good brother Aniceto since I read the books from Andrea Luiz. Anyways, awesome talk. God bless you.
Thank you. In our Spiritist groups, we talk about it in this. If a book doesn't have a really hard name to pronounce, it's not a Spiritist book. So with our English-speaking friends, we call it Aniceto Ani, because it makes it easier, than say Aniceto. It's so hard for some people.
Yeah, that's right. And this is one of the easiest ones to pronounce, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, Luis Barbosa, I like this sentence. Religious within. Many of us have become very good at practicing the external religion, but few of us can actually live the religious within. That's true.
In the pandemic taught us that, because a lot of people felt that, they needed to be at the Spiritist Center to be receiving the energies and the passes. And when we talk to them about the lives that are being promoted, the study groups that have been conducted throughout, since last March, our homes became an extension of the Spiritist Center. And we were able to bring what we were, and we got ready for the pandemic. People don't understand that. The Spiritist Center empowered us and got us ready to face it. And we continued all of the activities so that people could feel that religiousness within, right? So, wow, I can feel good at the time of the prayer at the moment, and maybe my spirit mentor guide is here applying the healing passes, for sure, as they always do. Sometimes we are not even aware, and they're there applying the healing passes, encouraging us, strengthening us. So yeah, the Spiritist Center became, our home became an extension of the Spiritist Center. And that was the beauty of the pandemic as well.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that information. You speak the truth. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you from Jussara.
Thank you, Jussara. Thank you.
You, God, that is beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
We have individual responsibility and collective responsibility.
Thank you, Julia.
Very nice. So before I'll ask you to do our final prayer, and before then, if you want to do some final remarks, I just want to let everybody know that next week, July 31st, we're going to have our 11 o'clock Eastern Time talk by Marcia Trajano. She's going to be speaking about understanding the power of compassion. So we continue our live next week with a very good talk again. So I would like, in the name of United States Spiritist Federation, thank you, Andrea. It was a great theme, great talk, very, very important message for us to think and live in our lives. And if you can now do your final remarks and with the final prayer for us, that would be wonderful. Thanks again.
Sure. It was a pleasure being with you guys today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really hope we hang tight during all that is happening. The benevolent spirits are with us, so let us be mindful of that and remember that always we are not alone. And on this note, in thinking about the benevolent spirits, let us open our hearts and truly maintain our minds elevated as we think about God, our Master Jesus, and the benevolent spirits that not only oversee the work of the United States Spiritist Federation, but also the International Spiritist Council, but also our own personal spirit guides who are here with us at this time, being so grateful for the moment that we have had, and also profoundly grateful for the Spiritist message that has come and arrived at the most defining moment of our immortal existence. How blessed are we for having been in touch with such a body of knowledge that not only empowers us, but makes us look at the world in a different way, that allows us to observe ourselves with more clarity and understanding, and allows us to try and develop compassion and love for our immediate families and those in society as well. We know that we have a long way to go, dear Jesus, until we are able to be with you. Yet we know that you are with us always, encouraging and guiding us so that we can walk faster towards the spirit illumination of our soul. Thank you so much for having been with us since before and inviting us to be in this planet that you oversee, inviting us to be part of your flock. We are so grateful for all of these blessings and more. And we ask that you bless all of us, our family members near and far, and stay with us always. So be it.